The first warning came carved into the hull of a derelict Vorgeth cruiser, drifting cold and dark at the edge of the Kepler expanse. Every scavenger who found it read the same thing, etched deep into the metal in 17 different galactic languages by hands that had clearly been shaking when they did it. The message was short, 4 sentences, and every experienced spacer who read it did the same thing afterward. They took a long look at the stars around them, checked their drive output, and got very far away from that derelict very quickly. The message said, "We attacked a human colony. We thought it would be easy. They followed us for 2 years across 6 star systems and they never stopped coming. Do not target humans. They will chase you until one of you is gone and it will not be them." That warning had been floating in the Kepler expanse for 60 years. Nobody took it seriously enough. Commander Vethra of the Skaun Raider fleet took it least seriously of all. He read it once on a datapad in the briefing room of his flagship, the Endless Hunger, surrounded by his senior officers, and he laughed. It was a genuine laugh, the kind that comes from a place of real confidence, from a being who has raided 43 systems in 15 years without losing a single ship. The Skaun were fast, they were brutal, and they had a strategy that had worked without fail for 2 decades. Hit hard, take everything, disappear before any response could be organized. Human Colony 7 Gamma was perfect for it. Small population of about 8,000, mostly miners and their families. Rich, the asteroid belt surrounding it contained deposits of Viridium ore worth more than most planets saw in a century. Remote, the nearest coalition military installation was 19 hours away at standard transit speed. Vethra looked at his officers after he finished laughing about the warning and said, "Humans bleed. Humans die. Humans run when they are hit hard enough. We hit them hard enough." His officers agreed. They were all dead within 3 years. But that part of the story comes later. The raid on Colony 7 Gamma lasted 4 hours and 11 minutes. It began at 300 hours station time, which Vethra had chosen specifically because human sleep cycles made that hour the most vulnerable. 12 Skaun Raider vessels dropped out of transit simultaneously, surrounding the colony's orbital station and the mining platforms below. The colony's defense system, 2 aging patrol ships and a surface battery designed to handle asteroid collision threats rather than warships, lasted 9 minutes before it was gone. Then the Skaun came down. What happened on the surface over the next 4 hours is not something that needs to be described in detail to understand its weight. 8,000 people, miners, engineers, teachers, doctors, children who had grown up in the low gravity of an asteroid belt and never touched a planetary surface. The Skaun took the Viridium ore. They took equipment. They took anything with value. They left 412 survivors, not out of mercy, out of indifference. 412 people were simply in places the Skaun didn't bother to check before they left. At 7:11 hours, the Endless Hunger and her 11 escort vessels jumped to transit and disappeared. Vethra filed the raid in his logs as a success. He moved on to his next target. He did not think about Colony 7 Gamma again for 11 days. That was how long it took the message to reach Coalition Military Command. The message was sent by a woman named Elena Marsh, 51 years old, chief engineer of the colony's water processing facility, one of the 412 who had survived by being in a subbasement doing emergency maintenance when the Skaun came. She had no military training. She had a communications system, emergency power, and the specific cold clarity that comes to certain people when everything around them has been destroyed and they are still standing. Her message was not panicked. It was not emotional. It was a precise, detailed account of the attack, ship configurations, weapon types, raid duration, behavior patterns, the direction of transit jump. Everything she had observed. Everything she could tell them that might be useful. At the end of it, she said simply, "There are 412 of us left. We need medical support, and I need to know who is going after them." The message reached Admiral James Kowalski at Coalition Military Command on Proxima Station at 3:40 hours, 11 days after the raid. Kowalski was 63 years old, thick-shouldered, with 38 years in uniform and the face of a man who had spent most of those years making decisions that kept him awake afterward. He read Marsh's message twice. He looked at the casualty figures. He looked at her description of the raid. Then he pulled up everything in the database on the Skoan. What he found was a pattern: 43 raids in 15 years, 31 of them against non-human species, the Veli, the Dorath species that had filed complaints through diplomatic channels, that had requested coalition assistance, that had eventually, in most cases, absorbed the loss and moved on because the Skoan were fast and hard to catch, and the cost of pursuit was high. 12 raids against human installations, all 12 in the past 3 years. All 12 treated by the Skoan as clean successes. Kowalski read every report on those 12 raids. Then he read the report on Colony 7 Gamma again. Then he picked up his comm and said, "Get me Captain Rosa Delgado, and find me whoever commands the 7th Rapid Response. Both of them my office, 1 hour." His adjutant, a young lieutenant named Park, looked at the time. It was 3:40 hours. "Sir, it's 1 hour," Kowalski said. They were there in 50 minutes. Captain Rosa Delgado was 44 years old and commanded the CDS Relentless, a pursuit-class destroyer that was the fastest ship in the Coalition's active fleet. She had short dark hair, quick dark eyes, and the compact energy of someone whose brain was always running slightly ahead of the conversation. She'd been pulled out of sleep by the summons and showed up in her uniform anyway, because she was Rosa Delgado, and that was how she did things. Colonel Marcus Webb commanded the 7th Rapid Response, a unit of 240 special operations soldiers that existed specifically for situations that didn't fit conventional military doctrine. He was 57, broad, quiet, with a silver star and 2 Purple Hearts on record, and a demeanor that suggested he'd earned them without particularly wanting to talk about it. Kowalski put Marsh's message on the screen. Let them read it. Neither of them spoke while they read. When they finished, the room was quiet for a moment. 43 raids, Kowalski said, 15 years. The Skoan have never been seriously pursued. Their strategy depends on that: they hit, they vanish. And by the time any response is organized, they're 3 systems away and have changed their transit pattern. They've never hit us this hard before, Delgado said. No, Kowalski said. They haven't. He looked at them both. I want to change what the Skoan know about consequences. I want to change it in a way they remember and in a way every other raider fleet in this part of the galaxy hears about. I want them to understand from personal experience what it means to do what they did to Colony 7 Gamma. Webb was looking at the casualty figures. 7,588, he said quietly. Yes, Kowalski said. And 412 survivors. Yes. Webb looked up from the screen. I'll need to talk to some of those survivors, he said. Specifically, anyone who got a good look at the ships, configuration details, anything the standard report doesn't have. Alina Marsh, Kowalski said. She's your contact. She'll give you everything she has. He paused. She asked who was going after them. What do you want me to tell her? Delgado asked. Kowalski looked at her steadily. Tell her we are. The Relentless departed Proxima Station 31 hours after Kowalski's briefing, carrying Webb's 7th Rapid Response in her troop bays, and a mission authorization that gave Delgado latitude she'd never had on a previous deployment. The authorization was broad because the situation was broad. They knew the Skoan's general operating region from 15 years of raid data. They had Alina Marsh's detailed description of ship configurations, and they had a pursuit-class destroyer that could sustain speeds no Skoan raider vessel could match in open transit. What they didn't have was a specific location. That was the first problem. The second problem was that the Skoan were not stupid. 43 successful raids meant 43 successful disappearances, and the pattern in the data showed a fleet commander who understood that variability was survival, different routes, different timing, different targets, never the same transit corridor twice. Vethra had stayed alive and free for 15 years by being unpredictable. Delgado sat in her command chair on the first day of transit and looked at 15 years of raid data spread across her tactical display, and thought about how you found something that had spent 15 years being unfindable. Her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka, had been thinking about the same problem and came to her with an answer on the second day. The ore, Tanaka said. Delgado looked up from the display. What about it? The Veridium ore from Colony 7 Gamma. The Skawn took it, all of it, based on Marsh's account. Veridium at that quantity has to be sold, refined, or stored. There are exactly 14 facilities in this region of space capable of processing Veridium ore at that volume without asking questions about origin. I've been cross-referencing the RAID data with known black market processing facilities for the past 18 hours. She put a star map on the display with 3 points marked. 3 of those 14 have received significant unexplained Veridium shipments within the past 8 years, in patterns that correlate with Skawn raid timing. One of them, she highlighted a point near the edge of the Kepler expanse. One of them received a shipment 6 days ago, large enough to account for the 7 Gamma ore. Delgado looked at the point on the map. 6 days ago, she said. Before the raid report even reached command, Tanaka said. They moved fast, which means they either have a standing arrangement with this facility or they were confident enough not to wait. Confident, Delgado said. They've never been chased. Why would they wait? She stood up from the command chair. Get me a course, and find out everything we know about that facility. The facility was called the Keth Processing Station, operated by a Dorvani merchant collective that had been carefully not asking questions about cargo origins for 30 years. It sat at the edge of a gas giant's gravity well, which gave it natural sensor interference and made undetected approach difficult but not impossible for a ship with the Relentless's drive profile. They came out of transit at extreme range, running completely cold, no active sensors, no drive emissions, nothing that would show up on the facility's detection systems as anything other than background noise. Tanaka ran passive sensors for 4 hours before Delgado was willing to move closer. What the passive sensors found was better than she'd hoped. The Endless Hunger and 4 of her escort vessels were docked at the facility. Not all 12 7 ships were elsewhere, possibly on patrol, possibly already moving to the next target. But 5 ships, including Vethra's flagship, were sitting still at a processing facility's dock, which was the single most vulnerable position a raider fleet could be in because docked ships took time to undock, and time was the one thing a Pursuit-class destroyer could take away very effectively. Delgado looked at the tactical picture for exactly 90 seconds. Then she said, "Battle stations. Webb, get your people ready, we're going in." The Relentless came in fast, because fast was what she was built for. She crossed the distance from cold running range to engagement range in 11 minutes, and by the time the Keth Processing Station's detection systems identified her as a coalition military vessel and sounded whatever alarm they sounded, she was already inside the range at which the docked Skawn vessels could make a clean break for open space. The Endless Hunger tried anyway. She was 2/3 undocked when the Relentless's forward battery opened up, and the shot that hit her drive section didn't destroy the ship, but it didn't need to. It made her unable to transit, which was the point, because Delgado didn't want Vethra dead yet. Dead meant over. Delgado had read the mission authorization very carefully, and Kowalski's language had been very specific about what change what the Skawn know about consequences actually meant in practice. It meant she needed him alive long enough to understand what was happening to him. The 4 escort vessels were faster to respond. Skawn raiders were always fast. It was their survival trait, and 2 of them made it to open space before the Relentless could cut off their transit windows. The other 2 she disabled cleanly, one with a drive shot and one with a targeted EMP that took their systems down without cracking the hull. Webb's people were on the docked vessels in 8 minutes. The Skawn were fighters and they fought. That needs to be said clearly. Vethra's crew were not cowards, not easy opponents. And the 8 minutes it took Webb's soldiers to secure the Endless Hunger cost them. 3 of Webb's people went to the medical bay during the boarding action. One of them, a sergeant named Thomas Reeves who had been with the 7th for 9 years, didn't come back out. Vethra was found on his bridge, still at his command station, surrounded by 4 dead crew members, and with a wound in his side that had been treated badly and recently. He was conscious. He looked at the humans coming through his bridge door with the specific expression of a being who had expected this day to never come and was recalibrating everything in real time. Webb walked up to him. Webb was not a small man, and in full tactical gear he was considerably larger, and he stood in front of Vethra and looked at him for a long moment without speaking. "Colony 7 Gamma," Webb said. Vethra said nothing. 7,588 people, Webb said. "You remember the number." Still nothing. "I do," Webb said. "I'm going to remember it for the rest of my life, and so are you. That's the point of this conversation." What followed was not a debrief in any conventional sense. It was Webb, methodically and without raising his voice, telling Vethra exactly what was going to happen next. The Endless Hunger and the 2 disabled escort vessels were being seized as coalition property. Their contents, including any veridium or remaining on board, were being catalogued as evidence. Vethra and his surviving crew were being taken to a coalition facility where they would spend a significant portion of their remaining years. The 2 vessels that had escaped would be found, because the Relentless was fast and the coalition's intelligence network was thorough. And the thing about running was that you had to keep running forever while the people chasing you only had to catch you once. "Here is what I want you to understand," Webb said at the end of it. He was still not raising his voice. "Not for your benefit, for the message, because you're going to tell people what happened here and I want the message to be accurate." Vethra looked at him. "We came from 19 hours away," Webb said. "In 31 hours from when that message reached our command, we had a ship moving. We found you in 6 days, not weeks, not months, 6 days." He paused. "There are 7 more of your ships out there right now. We are going to find them, not because it's strategically critical. We could let them go and it wouldn't change much. We're going to find them because you hit Colony 7 Gamma, and we don't leave that kind of thing answered halfway." Vethra spoke for the first time. His translator rendered his voice as flat and controlled, which meant he was scared and hiding it. "You can't track 7 ships across this region. The transit variables alone." "We tracked you to this station in 6 days," Webb said. "We'll find your other ships, and after we find them, if there's another Skawn Raider fleet out there thinking about human targets, they're going to hear about this, all of it, the 6 days, the seizure, the chase, and they're going to make a decision about whether the math works for them." He looked at Vethra steadily. "It won't work for them, because here's the thing about humans that warning on the derelict was trying to tell you. We don't stop. Not when we're tired, not when it's expensive, not when it would be more logical to let it go. When you hit us the way you hit 7 Gamma, you don't buy yourself a problem. You buy yourself a permanent condition. We become something that lives in your future for as long as it takes." A long silence on the bridge of the Endless Hunger. 43 raids, Vethra said finally. 15 years, no one ever. "No one ever came after you like this," Webb said. "I know. That's why you thought it would keep working." He reached down and picked up the datapad that had fallen from Vethra's console during the fighting, looked at it briefly, set it down. "It stopped working 11 days ago." They found the first of the 7 escaped vessels 19 days later. It had gone to ground in the debris field of a dead system 3 transits from the Kepler expanse, running cold, no emissions, doing everything right. Tanaka found it anyway because she had the transit data from the Keth station engagement and 19 days to work the problem, and working problems was what she did. The second vessel they found 26 days after that because the crew of the first, during their processing at the Coalition holding facility, gave up its location in exchange for a reduction in their sentence. Not all of them, some held out, but some didn't, and it only took 1. The remaining 5 took longer. 3 of them came in the same operation, 6 weeks after the second, when Webb's intelligence team identified a resupply point that Skawn Raider vessels used in the outer edge of the expanse, and the Relentless sat there for 4 days until they showed up. One arrived, then two more over the following day and a half, each one apparently unaware that the two before it had already been seized, which said something about how the Skaun communicated within their scattered fleet. The fourth remaining vessel, or fifth, depending on how you counted the sequence, tried to run when the Relentless appeared and actually made it to transit. They chased it through two jumps before cornering it against the gravity exclusion zone of a neutron star where transit was impossible, and the only options were fight or surrender. It surrendered. The last ship took 4 months. 4 months of Tanaka running data, of diplomatic contacts through back channels providing fragments of intelligence, of the Relentless covering distance that totaled, at the end of it, 23 transit jumps across 9 different systems. 4 months during which the crew of the Relentless did not go home, did not stand down, did not at any point treat the last remaining Skaun raider vessel as not worth the continued effort. Delgado was asked by her executive officer Lieutenant Commander Hayes at the 3-month mark whether command had any interest in calling it done. 11 ships seized, Vethra in custody, the raider fleet effectively destroyed. The last ship was 1 vessel. The cost of continuing the pursuit was measurable and real. Delgado looked at Hayes for a moment. "We told them we don't stop," she said. "That's not a thing we said, that's a thing we are. If we stop now, the message is, we don't stop unless it gets inconvenient." She turned back to the tactical display. "We don't stop." Hayes nodded once. He didn't bring it up again. The last ship was found in month 4 because its commander made the mistake of making contact with a Dorvani trading post to resupply, and the Dorvani trading post's operator, who had been given certain considerations by coalition intelligence in exchange for certain information, sent a signal. The boarding action on the last vessel was the cleanest of all of them, because by that point Webb's people had done it 11 times, and because the crew of the last ship had spent 4 months watching the rest of their fleet disappear one by one, and had clearly run out of the specific energy that resistance requires. When it was over, Delgado sat in her command chair and looked at the tactical display that now showed no remaining Skaun raider vessels at large in the region, and she felt the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical effort but from sustained will. Hayes came to stand beside her. "That's all 12, he said. "That's all 12, she confirmed. A pause. 4 months and 23 jumps for 1 ship, Hayes said. "Yes. The math on that is exactly right," Delgado said. "That's the point." She stood up slowly. "Get me a line to command, and someone tell medical I'm coming by. I want to check on the people from the last boarding." The report Kowalski received at Proxima Station was thorough. Delgado had written it herself, which was not standard practice for a mission of this length, but she had things she wanted said in a specific way, and she trusted herself to say them more than she trusted the standard reporting format. The report covered the tactical details, all 12 vessels accounted for, Vethra and surviving crew in custody, Veridium ore recovered in sufficient quantity to constitute meaningful restitution to Colony 7 Gamma's survivors. It covered the operational details, the 6-day find, the sequential seizures, the 4-month pursuit of the last vessel. And at the end, it covered one more thing. During the processing of Vethra and his crew at the Coalition holding facility, the facility's intelligence team had conducted standard debriefs. Most of what came out of those debriefs was tactical in nature, information about Skaun raider networks, supply routes, contacts. Useful, cataloged, filed. But one thing Vethra had said was not tactical. It was personal, and the debrief officer had included it in the report because she thought it mattered. She had asked Vethra, near the end of his debrief, whether he had any questions. He had been quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The last ship, why did they keep coming for it? 1 ship, 4 months, 23 transits, by any calculation that is not efficient." The debrief officer had said she would pass the question on. Delgado had given her an answer to pass back. The answer was, "Because we said we would, that's the whole answer. We said we would, and we are the kind of people who mean what we say. That's not a tactic, that's just who we are. Vethra had read that answer and been quiet for a long time. Then he had said in the flat, controlled voice that meant he was processing something difficult, "The warning on the derelict, 60 years ago. We read it. We laughed." "Yes," the debrief officer had said. "It was accurate," Vethra said. "Yes," she said, "it was." Kowalski read the report in his office on Proxima Station on a Tuesday morning, with a cup of coffee that had gone cold while he was reading. When he finished, he sat back and looked at the ceiling for a while. Then he pulled up Elena Marsh's original message, the one she'd sent from the sub-basement of the water processing facility on Colony 7 Gamma, running on emergency power, 11 days after the raid, with precise and useful information and one question at the end. Who is going after them? He drafted a response. It was short. It said, "We went after them. All 12 ships are accounted for. Vethra is in custody. The Veridium ore is being processed for restitution. It took 4 months and 23 transit jumps to get the last one, and I want you to know that we did not consider stopping. Not once." He paused. Then he added, "You asked the right question. The answer was always going to be us." He sent it. Elena Marsh received it in the temporary housing unit that had become home for 412 people while Colony 7 Gamma was rebuilt around them. She read it once, sitting on the edge of a cot in a room she shared with 3 other survivors, in the specific silence of someone receiving news they needed and had been carrying the waiting for. She didn't respond immediately. She sat with it for a while. Then she went to find the others, because they deserved to know, and because carrying news alone when you could share it was a waste of something important. Across the Kepler expanse and beyond it, in the raider networks and black market corridors and the darker parts of the galaxy where things happened that nobody official acknowledged, the story spread the way important stories spread, not through any official channel but through the specific gravity of information that changes calculations. 12 ships, 6 days to the find, 4 months for the last one, 23 transits for a single vessel. People who made their living on the wrong side of Coalition space heard the story and updated their files. Some of them updated their target lists. Human colonies came off those lists. Not because humanity was the most powerful force in the region, it wasn't, and everyone knew it. Not because the Relentless was invincible, it was one ship, and one ship could only be in one place. Because of the 4 months and 23 transits for one vessel. Because of what that said about the kind of people who had done it. There was a derelict drifting in the Kepler expanse with a warning carved into its hull in 17 languages, put there 60 years ago by hands that had been shaking. 60 years of spacers had read it, and most of them had taken it seriously enough to steer clear. Vethra had not. He had 43 successful raids and 15 years of experience, and a flagship called the Endless Hunger, and he had read the warning and laughed, and then he had made the specific and irreversible mistake of testing whether it was true. It was true. It had always been true. And somewhere in the cold and dark of the Kepler expanse, the derelict kept drifting, and the warning kept waiting, and the stars kept their silence on the question of whether the next one who came along would be smarter than the last. The stars, in this regard, were not optimistic. Neither were the humans. They were just ready.